Welcome to RESGEN's Giving Life podcast. Stories and conversations about life in Christ, everyday discipleship, and exploring ways that we as men can give life to others. My name is Tom Henderson, speaker, author, and founder of RESGEN, and I am so pumped that you are joining us today for our very first episode ever. And I cannot think of anyone better to have join us on our first podcast than Stuart Hall. Stuart's a husband, a father, a speaker, author, and most importantly, a follower of Jesus. He's been pouring his life into teenagers and their families for over 30 years, and today we are going to touch on a variety of topics, including how he discerned what the Lord wanted him to do with his life, how we can best give life to this generation of students, and what God taught him through his survival and recovery from COVID-19. We're also going to discuss two statements that he made at this year's RESGEN Men's Summit that were life-altering for the men in attendance, including myself, and that I know are going to greatly impact you as well. I hope you enjoy today's conversation with Stuart Hall. Stuart Hall, my friend, how are you, brother?
Tomcat, the Tomster. What's cracking? It's good to see you.
Oh my gosh, it's great to see you too. Do you realize that this is the first ever episode of RESGEN's Giving Life podcast, and we're on it together?
Do you not have better people to call? What is wrong with you?
No, like just in my intro, even in my intro, I said, I can't think of a better way to launch this podcast than to have conversation with you. So this.
Well, I can, but that's a whole different thing.
All right. So here's the deal. This might be an introduction of some of the listeners to you, okay? And I think back to how you and I connected. So just real quick, let me just tell everybody how you and I first connected. I was looking for kind of the final speaking, the final voice to be on the RESGEN Men's Summit stage in January of 2020, so just about 8 months ago. And so I was talking with a mutual friend of ours, Ryan Feltman, and who just always just has great insight for me. I've known Ryan for multiple years, and we have a great friendship and trust. And so I called him. I said, Ryan, I need a voice. I need a person that I probably have not connected with yet that could come and could bring a message to men, 1,000 men, about just youth culture and just our role as men. And he said one name. He said Stuart Hall. And that was my first introduction to you. And so you and I then shared multiple conversations on the phone, trading emails, and I knew right then through those interactions that I had, not even face to face at that time, just your heart and your passion, and that Ryan did me a great solid by introducing me to you, and then you to so many men here in Sioux Falls. But for those of our listeners that don't know who you are, just give us kind of some basics, just marriage, kids, where you're living, job, that kind of stuff.
Well, first and foremost, in all sincerity, I am incredibly honored that you asked me to do this. I do have to say that Ryan Feltman needs to get out more if I was the only voice or the first voice he thought about, and I love Ryan dearly. But, yeah, I mean, I'm a 30-year youth ministry guy, 30-plus year youth ministry guy that has no plans whatsoever of doing anything else but Kelly, my incredible, gorgeous wife, and I want to slide across the finish line with our hair on fire like we're driving some car in Fast and Furious. That's, that's our goal. We believe in the next generation. It's our heartbeat. Some of that, to be honest with you, is because we have 3 young adult kids, and we just believe in their generation. But I was 13 years local church youth pastor. And since 1997, I've worked in nonprofit world with an emphasis on ministry. In 2008, I went on staff with Orange, formerly known, the artist formerly known as the Rethink Group.
Yeah.
Shout out to Prince. And
hey, this is kind of the region we're in. We're in the Prince region. We're just south of Minnesota. Yeah,
exactly. That's why as soon as you and I started talking, I'm like, I have met my northern brother, and he has met the dude from the dirty South that is his long lost brother. But yeah, I'm the director of student leadership for Orange, and then direct an organization that's a sub part of Orange called Influencer. So
Okay.
that's me, married to Kelly for 28 years and 3 young adult kids.
Right. So, and they're all in college, correct? Or actually, you get
No,
one graduation.
so our son Grant is 25, graduated from Duke University where he played football in 2017.
Yep.
And he did what anybody who gets a Duke University degree should do. He joined the Peace Corps.
Okay.
And so Grant just came home this past December from a 2.5-year service with the Peace Corps in Central America, and came home to get a job right when the pandemic started. And then our oldest daughter, Chandler, is 23. She graduated virtually from Rollins College, where she played basketball.
Yes, that was just this year. Yeah.
Yeah, she graduated in our living room because of the pandemic. And then our youngest, Cameron, the youngest daughter, Cameron, is a rising sophomore. She plays soccer at the University of Florida and is already back in school at Florida. You know, and in the state of Florida, that's a hot spot. So it's, I mean, yeah, we live in a locker room and now with a lot of anxiety because of the pandemic.
Okay. And it was just one of their birthdays just a couple of days ago, right?
Yes, Chandler just turned 23. That's correct. In fact, I just took the decorations down today in the house because it was like a 5-day gala.
Well, look at you. I mean, such a good dad, still throwing big birthday parties, decorating the house for your daughter's 23.
I didn't say I decorated. I said I took them down.
Okay, no, right on.
That's Kelly's specialty. I didn't decorate. I destroyed.
Okay, got it. All right. So, thanks for catching us up on family, what you're doing, and so I want to revisit some of the things that you talked about the summit, because I think that's going to really be a great conversation for us to have and great encouragement for those that are watching and listening. But prior to doing that, so the summit took place here in Sioux Falls at the end of January this year. And then you've been on quite a journey since then. I mean, we had planned on you coming back in March for our RESGEN Parents Night, which we have now postponed in October. We're looking forward to seeing you again. And that was one of the first things that, at least in Sioux Falls, that got canceled, kind of a large gathering due to just COVID really picking up and people not really knowing what we were dealing with and all that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, I'm on Twitter, and it's the first week of April 6th, if I remember correctly, where I saw a tweet from your wife that's basically said, hey, look, we're taking Stuart in to the ER. And then it turned into another tweet, and so many people journeying with you and your family as you battled COVID. So tell us just briefly about just kind of that, because you got it, and then, praise God, you're here.
Yeah.
But so
yeah. Well, thank you for asking and reminding me that I had COVID. April the 7th, I think, is the day that Kelly tweeted. I had been in self-quarantine since March the 25th. I'm sorry, March the 29th. We had gone to the ER and they had self-quarantined me for a variety of reasons. A long story and crazy story short, my wife and son rushed me to the hospital at 1:00 in the morning on April the 7th. And by the time I got to the hospital, they immediately intubated me. And the first doctor that my wife saw was a cardiologist. And I had a COVID-induced heart attack, COVID-induced congestive heart failure, had blood clots in my legs, pneumonia, eventually developed a really, really dangerous bacterial infection, and was in a medically induced coma for 20-something days. In the fight of my life, obviously I'm talking to you, and the only reason I'm talking to you is because of friends like you and so many other people, countless people around the country who prayed and loved me home. God, for whatever reason, and I'll never understand why he chose to keep me here with, the countless thousands of people that have lost their life to this virus. But Jesus did a miracle in my life, and I'm here to talk about it. And I've said this often. I don't think God made it happen, but I do think he wants to make it matter. And I have every intention of making sure, much like Private Ryan and Saving Private Ryan, when Tom Hanks' character looks at him and says, "Earn this," that's the way I feel. I feel like the sacrifice that so many doctors and nurses who risked their life to save mine, and the countless people who prayed for me, I've got to earn the gift I've been given. So I'm so grateful, so undeserving, but so incredibly grateful that I'm alive. And the last thing I would say, Tom, to anyone who thinks it's a conspiracy theory or it's not real, it's a political agenda, although I'm sure both parties are trying to politicize it. It's a very real thing. And the least we can do is show our respect to the healthcare workers and men and women who are fighting to save lives that they don't even know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's another thing that I want to revisit with you, at some point in our conversation today, as I watched just a phenomenal interview that took place between you and Kelly and Andy Stanley a few weeks back on North Point's Sunday morning broadcast, and encourage anybody to go and watch that, because it was an amazing testimony of you and your bride sitting next to each other, and just really sharing those exact same things that you just shared with me about. It was just so many people that carried you and your family, and it was God's grace. It was God's grace that said, you know what, there's still so much life left in Stuart to live, and so many more people that you are that you're impacting already, that you're going to impact. And so there was something that you mentioned, and I'll mention it now because I think it just came up. But you mentioned another statement in addition to the one that really caught my ear during that interview with Andy, where you talked about, I'm not saying God caused it to happen, but he wants it to matter, which I loved. But you also said this statement during that interview, and then you actually created, I think, some sort of post, or maybe it was Andy that did, where it just said that we have made an idol out of certainty. Talk with me about that. What does that mean to you? What prompts you to really share that specific word?
No, that's a great question. Kelly and I had been on a journey for a year and a half before I got sick about this. An idol is an idol, not because it has some certain property, but because of the value we place on it. And I think in American Christianity, especially, we have placed premium value on ideas like clarity, security, control, certainty. And if you think about it, we as human beings do everything we can to avoid pain. As parents, we do everything we can to protect our children from pain. And as friends, we do everything we can to try to fix our friends' pain. And then we can't do it, and we wonder why we feel like failures. Well, the reason we feel like failures, life isn't the way it's supposed to be. Life is the way that it is. And it shows that I think we've placed premium value on this idea that I want to be certain that everything is, every T's crossed, every I is dotted. I think what happens subtly, to be honest with you, Tom, is that we stop placing our faith and trust in the person of Jesus, and we start placing our faith and trust in the things we believe about him. If we get everything right about what we believe, then we're not going to have calamity. And the problem with that is, Jesus himself said, in this world, this is the Stuart Hall paraphrase, right? in this world, the proverbial dookie is going to hit the fan. and consequently, what do you do when the rug is pulled out from under you? And so I think my health crisis, and I even talked about this when I was there in January. My dad died in the first part of January.
Right.
2 months before that, I had surgery, and then the pandemic hit. So all around me is all kinds of chaos, and I think all of us have to ask ourselves this question: what is it, or who? Better stated, who is it that you're leaning the weight of your existence on? Are you leaning it on your belief system? Because let's I talked about this a little bit when I was with you as well. It's, we speak freely of love as long as it serves our purpose. But when a teenager walks into their parents' room and tells them that they're coming out of the closet, you start really floundering when disease happens. Like, consider the number of listeners or viewers who've had a child get sick, death. It really begins to shine a light on the porous nature of certainty. And I said this in that interview, and I believe it with all my heart. Our version of faith is just a churched up version of the American dream with enough Jesus to make it seem like it's legitimate. And God wants to make this matter by, at least for me, respectively, I've got to make sure that the full weight of my existence is leaning on the person of Jesus, because he's the only one that can hold me up. But the believe is a who word. It's not a what word.
Yeah. No, that's good. So Stuart, for you, when do you remember being a young person, a young adult, where you said, you know what? Jesus is who I want to follow. And there's usually a who that's involved outside of obviously the Holy Spirit and Christ, but who was it that really helped you understand that? Not in its fullness, probably, because we don't understand it, and we'll never fully understand, right? But I mean, we'll grow in our understanding. But unpack that for us.
Yeah, my life revolved around athletics growing up. I was a high school academic All-American in basketball and football. Went to an SEC school my freshman year to play basketball. My mom and dad had us in church up until second grade, and then we just stopped going. I was fearful for my life around my dad. He was, as I talked about a little bit at Summit, my dad was a crusty Vietnam veteran. You made your bed up every morning. It was very much behave and be moral, but it was really fear-based more than anything else. And I went away to school and, went from being a giant fish in a very small pond to being a tadpole in a vast ocean. I got injured, and everything I'd built my identity around kind of got stripped away. But I am so grateful. And this is crazy. I have not seen or spoken to this girl since my freshman year in college. Her name is Shannon. I know she's from Nashville, Tennessee. She was a sorority girl. We met at orientation my freshman year. And for whatever reason, as my life started falling apart that freshman year, she would just periodically call and say, hey, let's go grab something to eat. There was nothing romantic or anything like that. We just hung out. And she loved Jesus. And she didn't shove Jesus down my throat. She wasn't trying to, convert me or anything. She just loved me. She just cared for me. And it helped me survive that year. I go home that summer, had 3 friends get killed. 1 friend in June, 1 friend in July, 1 friend in August from freak accidents. And the last one, I finally got, kind of picked my head up and asked the question, bro, what is this about? And that happened. I remember my mom coming and waking me up early on a Saturday morning and telling me about this one girl that I'd gone to high school that had gotten killed in a car accident. And that Sunday was the first time I'd been in church since I was in second grade, or, we would, every once in a while we would go. I just knew I needed Jesus. And then I promptly transferred to a Christian college to finish playing basketball. And I wound up, this is a pretty funny, crazy story. I transferred to a Christian school, a Baptist school, to finish my career because I didn't need to go back to where I went my freshman year. I tell a lot of people that 97% of my regrets happened that year in that town at that school.
At that school.
But I wound up being the only professing believer on a basketball team at a Christian school. And we would have FCA/chapel every Wednesday, and I would be the only dude to show up. So the chaplain literally had no other choice but to disciple me because there was nobody else. And that's how I started growing in my faith.
Have you seen that chaplain since?
Oh yeah. did a lot of things with him as I got older, and he was a youth pastor in town. His name is Greg Davidson. I'm very appreciative of him.
Okay. And is he still doing ministry as well?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. I'm old, Tom.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus was in high school. You got to remember that. Jesus was in high school. Yeah, he was a really good baller, by the way. Jesus was.
Okay. All right. So you transfer this Christian school. That reminds me very quite a bit about my college career, except for it wasn't. I was not a college athlete. Go figure. I mean, one look at me, you're like, oh yeah.
but you have the most coiffed, perfectly manicured beard on the planet.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's freshly trimmed for you.
Freshly trimmed.
Yeah. So I transferred after my freshman year to a Christian college, and that's where I really started going after the Lord and trying to understand what He wanted for my life. And that's also where I started really exploring my call, my full-time call to ministry. Changed my major from pre-med actually to religious studies and theology, and started wrestling with that call. So was that when you started to feel the call into full-time ministry in your life as well, Stuart, or was that later on for you?
This may feel controversial, but I don't think it is. I think calling may be the most misunderstood, abused theological idea in the scriptures. I don't feel like I'm called to full-time ministry. I'm called to Jesus, which, by the way, if you're a Jesus follower, we're all called to Jesus. I do think I have a certain, I sound like Liam Neeson in Taken. I have a certain set of skills. I have a certain gifting. We all do. We all have gifts. We have passion. And the trick is, how do we mesh that with purpose? Because the most content, passionate, energized people on the planet are people who have taken their gifting, matched it with their passion, and meshed it with why God put them on the planet. And I have, 30 plus years of working with teenagers. I have seen students and adults who are gifted here, but they're not passionate about what they're doing, or they're passionate about this, but they're not gifted at what they're doing, or they're gifted and passionate, but they're not meshed with why they're on the planet. I feel like what happened to me, it was the back end of my junior year in college. I was a counselor for a youth camp, and I had a cabin full of middle school boys. And I spent the whole week laughing my head off at these guys. They were hysterical. It reminded me of how awkward it is to be a middle schooler.
Yeah.
And if you have middle schoolers, parents that are listening or watching, there's nothing you can do about it, because middle school is just awkward. There's not one single person, in my opinion, that is going to watch or listen to this that would accept $1 million to go back to middle school. It's just an awkward time. But God just broke my heart for these guys. And I saw, like, the few gift set, the gifts that I had, like, I am really passionate about this, and this is why I'm on the planet. And I was supposed to go to the Philippines that summer and play with athletes in action, and I canceled the trip. And I was a communications major. I wanted to look like you in this podcast, but be talking about sports. But God had other plans.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I'm now going to change the word calling to purpose. So I thank you for setting my.
No, I wasn't trying to scold you.
No, I like it. Hey, I love that. I think and calling, you're right. I think it can be such a churchy word and a churchy buzzword. Well,
and the other part of it too, because I work with teenagers, I think the last time I looked at the data, 99.6 of core students in our churches who attend at least once a month on a regular basis are not going to do full-time vocational ministry.
Right.
But they are going to be doctors, coaches, teachers, lawyers, tech people, entertainers, athletes, maybe the future president of the United States. How does your gifting, passion mesh with your purpose? Those are the kind of people we need to push into culture.
Right. And that's one of our goals with the Men's Summit and Parents Night and all these other things that we're doing is how are we equipping, regardless of who's in the audience, who's listening, any conversation we have across a table at a coffee shop is
so
how do we always view ourselves as ministers of the gospel? Because that's exactly what the call, the purpose is for every single one of us who follow Jesus.
Right. And some of that, to be honest, is about perspective. When you start understanding that everything is spiritual, everything is spiritual. There is a spiritual backstory to every movie you watch, every song you listen to. When you start understanding that, I think it opens up the gates for us to go, good Lord, why have I told somebody this today. Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski, tells a story when he recruited Jabari Parker. Jabari Parker was just 6'9", 6'10", freak of an athlete. And when Coach K went to his in-home visit, he brought a pot that you would put a plant in. And he told Jabari's parents, I could say that Jabari is a small forward and this is who he's going to be for the rest of his basketball career. And he broke the pot and he said, what I want to do is I just want to create fertile ground and see how he grows.
Yeah.
That's my hope and prayer for the next generation, for us as adults. We've got to get out of this pot because everything is spiritual.
I want to know
and if you're just catching up and you heard me say pot, I'm talking about
potted plant.
A potted plant, yeah. And not the kind of plant that is called pot. Right. But a confusing conversation.
Yeah. Well, I want to know, did Coach K then go get a broom and a dustpan and clean up the mess? That's what I want to know, because I'm sure they were like, now hold on a second.
I may have the broken part wrong. You may have not broken it.
But that's more dramatic. I like it. Okay. Yeah. So you've been doing ministry for over 30 years.
Yes.
And, they always talk about, like, when you're in youth ministry, and I've been doing it for 20 now, and some of the ways that I reach students is much different than the way I used to. Mm-hmm. But to be in youth ministry, student ministry for 30 plus years shows that's a long time. That shows some great commitment and longevity.
You are so kind. That is such a great way to say it. Brother, you is old.
But so what is there something, and you've probably already communicated this, so I'm sorry if it's kind of a repeat thing, but what has kept you in the youth ministry game so long? Like, you talk about that you just believe wholeheartedly in, and you say this generation of teens, but it's been, year upon year upon year. So what continually breaks your heart for students in, today as it did 25 years ago?
Yeah, I think Duffy Robbins, who is one of my youth ministry heroes, said it best. Teenagers will always gravitate to the oldest person in the room who takes them seriously. And if I've done anything right, I just take the next generation seriously. And without us chasing a rabbit or getting political, if you need to understand the power of the next generation, I live in Atlanta, Georgia, north of Atlanta. Atlanta is the blackest city in America. There is obviously a lot of political unrest revolving around the murder of George Floyd and everything that's happened as a result of that. There have been statues of Confederate generals and dignitaries being torn down. And Tom, here's what I mean about being passionate about the next generation. I am 52 years old, and I have walked by those statues for 52 years and never done a thing. Mm-hmm. Generations before me have walked by those statues and never done a thing. This generation refuses to do it. That's why there's hope, because they are willing to clean up mess that we've left for them. And so I think I just take them seriously. I just believe in them. I believe in our 3 young adult children. They're not perfect, but our love for them doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be true. I just have to take them seriously.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I think I've done right. Everything else is like God and luck, and I will say this, I have had incredible mentors and people who believed in me that have pushed me to the front and allowed me to probably fail more than they should have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's allowed me to gain some footing. And, I I do what I do for a living the same way I was as an athlete. I'm just a tryhard. I'm not that gifted. I just have to hustle.
Which is a negative term. Like if you talk to kids a lot of times, my kids will be like, "Dad, I don't want to be a try hard." But I'm like, but no, that's what we should. I mean, we should try hard and do things with passion and with energy and excellence and just get after it.
Yeah. If you think about it, those who can play. Those who can't play, coach. And all I've done is taken the same idea and I've shifted it toward what I'm gifted and passionate about and how it meshes with my purpose.
Yeah. Well, you bring up mentorship, and I'm glad you did, because I think that mentorship is so important regardless of your career, right? I mean, we can talk about, like, especially for people in ministry. I know there's a lot of people right now that are listening that are in full-time ministry, youth pastors, whatever, and I'll get a direct word from you to them shortly. But mentorship is so important regardless of the field or career that you're in.
No question.
Did you have a time where you sought out a specific mentor, where you were like, you know what, I really need some mentorship in this area, or I know that I need another voice, that really birthed maybe a relationship that you could pinpoint and say, that was super important for me?
Oh gosh, there wasn't a time. There were times, and there still are times, where I'm just really, really fortunate that I'm surrounded by people who will give me time and will sit down across from me. One of the best things that I've ever done is surround myself with men who will call me on my junk. Interestingly enough, and I hope this doesn't sting too much, I purposely chose people who aren't in ministry, simply because, in fact, all of them are athletic coaches, because I want to be coached up. I need them to go, man, you stink in that area. But yeah, mentorship has always been like one of the coolest things to ever happen to me, Tom. One of the best birthday gifts that Kelly ever gave me. I work with a lady named Darla, her husband, who has passed away, since. She's such a dear lady. They owned a Christian Brothers automotive place. And one year for my birthday, they surprised me with a 2.5-hour lunch with Ravi Zacharias, just us two.
Cool.
I asked 3 questions the entire meal, because it was like sitting with Moses. And you want to talk about intimidating. He comes in with a copy of one of the books that Andy and I had written together. He's printed out my bio. He's got all these questions for me. Like, it was life altering. But the reason why they knew that would be important to me is because it's all that kind of thing has always been not someone famous. I'm just telling you that because of his recent passing and how much he's meant to our world. But just people speaking into your life. Like, I would rather be a hypocrite than the same person I was 10 years ago. Like, if we're not growing and changing, there's something wrong. And so much of that growth happens when you surround yourself with people that are going to stretch you, that are going to tax your mind, that are going to question you, that are going to ask you hard questions. There's a reason why people don't want to be mentored.
Right.
More times than not, our accountability and mentorship is more like a glorified AA meeting where we're like, I struggle with less. Me too. Let's go. And I just want to be around people that are going to ask me hard questions and really want me to be the best version of the person God created me to be.
And that kind of relationship, one, takes an ultimate vulnerability and transparency on everybody's part, but it also takes what you mentioned just a minute ago, a tremendous amount of time.
Yes.
And that's one thing that we don't think we have very much of, right? I mean, it's just because we're so busy, we're so focused on our own agenda, plan, whatever. But when you talked about how people that were willing to give you time, and, even you think about the birthday gift that you were given. Obviously, your wife knows you. She knows which would be very powerful to you. But to know that would be meaningful to you is that sends such a message of how much you are deeply known.
Yeah.
Which I think that's
and it was just this simple, and I didn't even connect the dots. But the woman who worked in our office, whose husband owned a Christian automotive place, Ravi came to their garage and had his car worked on. And she told Kelly goes, "Hey, can you ask him?" And he was so gracious to do it. Yeah, it's exactly what you're talking about. That when it's important to you, it's important to others.
Mm-hmm. And you think about how many people would not want to, and we get phone calls, we get emails that say, "I'm so sorry to bother you." Mm-hmm. And I just think about, what if that mechanic would have had that mentality with Ravi, right? I mean, because, you know what? And maybe he didn't know too much. I mean, he probably knew who Ravi was, right? I'm assuming. But what if he was a little...
He looks like Moses. Yeah. Good Lord.
But if he would have been nervous and said, "You know what? I don't want to bother him with that."
Right.
Well, that would have robbed you of a blessing. But you know what? Knowing who Ravi is, which I don't know him near to the level that you do, but the stuff that I've read and seen, whatever.
I don't, dude. I had 2 hour and a half, 2.5 hour lunch with him. That's the extent of my relationship with Ravi.
Well, regardless, I would say that knowing what we know about him, it would have robbed him of a blessing as well. Because I'm sure that he, greatly enjoyed that as well. And I think that if we weren't so maybe worried about bothering people so much, we wouldn't miss out on opportunities that God has provided for us.
That's so good. It's interesting you bring up that point, because I just read a story like an hour ago of an interaction between Emmitt Smith and Michael Jordan. Emmitt Smith contacted Michael Jordan and said, "Hey, can we sit down and talk about business? I want you to teach me about business." And if you know anything about the Jordan brand, $33 billion a year or something insane.
Yeah, it's doing pretty well.
It's doing okay. I actually have a Jordan shirt on as I speak and shoes. Okay. But they get to the end of their conversation and Emmitt goes, "Bro, why haven't we done this more? We need to do this more." And Michael Jordan looks at him and goes, "What did you do for us to be able to have this meal together and talk?" He said, "Well, I asked you." He goes, "Well, that's the key. Just ask." And that's your point. Like, all they can do is say no. There's somebody that you want to spend time with to have them pour into you. All they can do is say, they can either say yes or no.
Yeah.
You got a 50-50 shot.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I was taught this statement: don't allow other people to say no, don't say no for other people.
That's good.
Give them the opportunity to say no, and just, no, if, and the other thing that I always think about is that not everything is God's timing either. Sometimes it might be right, but it might not be right now, right. And so, like, I think about if it wouldn't have worked out for you to come to the Men's Summit this year and you said, "Hey, Tom, I'm booked, whatever," I'd be like, okay, it must not be the right time. It's another time. And so I just think there's so many things that sometimes we say no for someone else. And how many times do we say no when, for the Lord?
Mm-hmm. Well, that means that we need to hurry up and finish this, because I got to go talk to Michael Jordan.
Yeah. That's good. And then I'll wait for that bridge that you're going to build, for me to be able to as well. Okay. All right. So we've talked, man, brother, we have covered a lot of ground.
I was just joking about needing to get off this. I'm having a good time.
Okay. Well, here's the deal. So we've covered a lot of ground. I got a little bit more to go with you here, but I want to break it up, and I want to do something that I think is going to be a lot of fun. It's just, I just call it rapid fire favorites. Okay.
Oh, Jesus.
So, because what this is going to do is it's just going to give us a little bit more of an idea of just you. And I mean, it's not going to be super hard, but I think that it could be kind of fun to go through this with you. So
is this the test that President Trump is talking about doing so well on?
Yes, this is exactly that one. Yes, exactly. All right, so here we go. Episode 1 of Rapid Fire Favorites, Stuart Hall. Here we go. Favorite musical artist.
Oh, I can't do one.
Okay. You're already breaking the rules. Okay.
So, no. Here we go. Prince, Stevie Wonder, Bryan Adams, the Eagles.
Oh, okay. So we're getting to know who you are. Okay.
And by the way, if you're young and you're listening to my list, you'll notice no one in your generation is on my list.
Well, okay, that's you love the generation, maybe just not who they're like going to concerts of. I get it. Okay, all right. Favorite thing to do on a free Saturday? You got a whole Saturday. Favorite thing to do?
Coffee with my wife. We'll go to the beach, paddleboard, lay out, come home, grill and chill with some friends, and then it's sexy time.
Okay. All right, you start that day early because that like each one of those is good. Okay, good.
You said favorites.
Yeah, I did say favorite. Okay,
people at home, I'm just keeping it real.
Now this one won't because this kind of tags on to the musical artist. But your favorite song from the '80s?
Ooh,
it's the song that you hear and like you got to stop everything and sing along.
Walk This Way, Run DMC and Aerosmith. And then the entire Bryan Adams Reckless album.
That is the second time you've mentioned Bryan Adams in this conversation.
That whole album is unbelievable. Think about it. There's not one bad song. For those of you playing along at home, go download Bryan Adams Reckless. There's not one bad song on that album.
I might be mistaken, but I think I might have sang a Bryan Adams song in middle school choir.
Okay, do not shame me. Your age shaming me.
Okay. Favorite hair product? Because I know, like, with the kind of volume you get on your lid right there, you got to have a favorite hair product that you can let us know about.
I use coconut oil.
Really?
I do. Yes. Literally, all I do is dry it, put a little bit on my finger, rub it together, put it in there. I don't use a brush or don't use a comb. Just use my hands.
Okay.
That's all I use.
Okay. That's I don't know that I can try that.
I have no idea why people would care about that, but there you go.
I just thought it'd be fun.
And as I'm walking around, people are like, "Have you been to the beach?" I mean, it smells like suntan.
Yeah. What do I smell like? Why do you smell like Hawaii? What is going on?
That's exactly right.
All right. No pressure on this one, but what is a favorite event you've ever spoke at?
Oh gosh.
I mean, outside of the Men's Summit, of course.
Well, in all sincerity, that was a dope event, man. It was really, really good. And still, Chris Broussard, Jason Wilson, and we stay connected.
Yeah, dude.
You've become like a brother to me. Yeah, that was incredible. For the last 20 something years, I've spoken at this camp called Big Stuff in Panama City Beach.
I was hoping you mentioned that.
And they are family. It's just unbelievable to see what Jesus does every single week of the summer. And you can pray for this better than anybody, the event organizations around our country who've literally been shut down because of the pandemic. But Big Stuff is family. So I would say every single time I've been able to stand up on that stage has been special.
Yeah. All right, last one of these, and then we'll get into some of that deeper stuff again. But favorite way that you give yourself life. One of the things that we really, I think, as men, especially, sometimes we're always thinking about just all the responsibilities and all the pressure and the need to perform and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that we don't often do is give ourselves life in meaningful ways. So what is a way that you give yourself life so that then, and we'll talk a little bit about this in the future in a few minutes as well, is so that you can then give others life?
Mm-hmm. I started this discipline when our kids were really, really young, mainly because our kids were really, really young. And when they came down the stairs, all chaos ensued. So I started getting up really, really early. I'm a geek. I love to read. And if I don't have that time, and I would couple that with, up until a couple of years ago, I didn't drink coffee, but my wife is a coffee drinker. And then I started getting old and I needed some energy, but getting up early and reading and then having a cup of coffee with my wife and talking is like life-giving to me.
Yeah.
If I don't have those two things, it feels like the day is off. And I would add a third thing, and that is, especially on the heels of my health crisis, this is week 12 maybe of physical therapy, which is now turned into full on working out.
Yeah.
And I had forgotten, we were really, really active, but I wasn't working out like I'm working out now. I tell people all the time that, I had COVID-19 induced heart attack and, congestive heart failure, pneumonia, blood clots. And I think I'm going to die in physical therapy because these people think that I am prepping for the NBA supplemental draft. They're trying to kill a brother. But it gives me life, man. I feel more alive. And in all honesty, a lot of that is because I feel like I have a second lease on life.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to that then, so if you could say that, this is something that you learned, that God taught you through just your battle, survival, and now recovery from COVID, and just what has he taught you? What is he teaching you?
Oh, I can't cover all that. You don't have enough time, but there's a C.S. Lewis quote that miracles are a story written in small letters that have been written across the world in letters too large for us to see or perceive. The fact that we woke up this morning on a globe that is doing, 90,000 miles an hour, rotating 1,000 miles an hour next to a burning ball of gas. Think about that for a second. We're going 67,000 miles an hour through the universe, spinning 1,000 miles an hour, and none of us are losing our balance or our hair's not moving. And if that were to shift or change one increment, we would either burn up or freeze. Life is a miracle.
Yeah.
And there are miracles around us that we don't even perceive. What happened to me was God writing in small letters what's happening all around us. And I think what's happened to me is, and Kelly and I have this discussion often, because the harsh reality is my wife and children experienced all the trauma from my illness. I didn't. Yeah. I laid there and then started trying to build myself back up physically. But, fear doesn't stop you from dying. It stops you from living. And if you're not careful, we can be so afraid that we just paralyze ourselves. And I don't want to do that. That's probably the biggest thing, is that, I just want to live. I want to make it matter. And I want to live.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. So I want to ask, this is an interesting, I think it's going to be an interesting question, because I think about and I would put myself in this camp a little bit. Again, I know you got me by 10 years in ministry, but I've been doing ministry for 20 years, and you've been doing it for 30 plus. But so talk with me, like, how has ministry changed you?
Ooh, that's a really good question. One thing I learned really, really fast, well, I didn't learn it fast enough, but it's certainly true, is that if you boil down what it is we're trying to do in influencing other people, it's about building strong relational bridges that will bear the weight of truth. If you think about it, that's what ministry is. It's building incredibly strong, stable bridges of relationship that'll bear the weight of truth that we have to give. What ministry has done for me more than anything else is it's forced me to become a better bridge builder. Like, where there is no relationship, there is no influence. And ministry teaches you that. Like, you will flop if you do not do that well. And it's easy to get that mixed up in a world and in a time where the stage and a microphone and a platform is so lauded. But you know this better than anybody. How many people do you and I know that are a completely different person off stage than they are on stage?
Yeah.
what earns you the right to be heard is that relational bridge. I would say that is a big deal. I think it also has helped me improve as a leader, because leadership is about building strong relational bridges that'll bear the weight of truth.
Right.
And, you know, if we're not careful, the last thing I would say is if we're not careful, we will lose sight of the big rocks when you're doing ministry. My pastor talks about choosing to cheat a lot. The reality is there is not enough hours in a day for you to do everything that you could do in ministry, because there's always somebody that needs help. There's always somebody that could use a helping hand or an encouraging word. But here's the thing. The big rocks in my life are my faith, my wife, and my children.
Yeah.
And I will not, ministry has forced me to choose, and I will not trade my relationship with my wife. I am my wife's first husband, and I plan to be the only husband that she has. And I am daddy to only 3 people in the world.
Yeah.
Why would I sell my soul? Because I'm not unique anywhere else. And here's how I know. If I would have told you no for the summit, you would have gotten somebody else to speak. And they probably would have been better.
No.
So I'm not unique as a communicator. I'm not, bosses that are, employees that are listening and watching this right now, you think you're unique at work? Quit. Watch how quick they replace you. I was on a plane, Tom, September the 11th, flying home. And I was flying home from Dallas, where I would fly out every Monday, speak at a big college event on Monday night, and fly home every Tuesday. September 11th, 2001, I'm flying back home. And when I land at the Atlanta airport, it's a ghost town. As by the time I got to baggage, the National Guard is coming in to commandeer the airport. I drove immediately to our son's preschool, got him out of school, and I went home and I told my wife, I'll finish out the year, but I'm not doing that event anymore. I quit, and guess what? They got somebody to replace me. And he was better than I am. Some of you may have heard of him. His name is Matt Chandler.
Yeah.
He's better than I was. But I'm not unique as a communicator, but I am unique to Kelly and our children. Ministry has made me cheat the things I need to cheat.
That's such a powerful truth, but it's a humbling truth. I remember when I was told by a mentor of mine when I was a youth pastor. I was in Portland, Oregon for 6 years, from 99 to 05, and I remember one of my mentors out there saying, "Tom, just so you know, we're all replaceable, and when you're done being a youth pastor here, which will happen someday probably, they will get another one." And I remember being literally, Stuart, I was shocked. I'm no, but I was kind of going to be like the second coming of Jesus to Oregon City. Okay. I mean, you do understand that, right? And then
you do understand that my feces does not stink.
So fast forward to 5.5 years later. And that's a story we don't have time to go into about how I, it was leaving there and moving back to Sioux Falls. But I remember the going away party. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't there was a few people that were sad and teens that were crying and all those kinds of things. But there was a lot of, hey, good luck to you. Hey, we'll miss you. But a lot of, hey, we're going to move on. And we're going to move on without you, and we'll be fine.
Here's the question. Did you get a sheet cake?
There was a sheet cake, but our church had a thing when pastors lived that had this money tree where they would have this. Oh. Yeah, dude. They would have this this tree up, and then people could clothespin money and whatever. And so I was like, boy, that'd be really helpful to do that. But I didn't get a money tree. But what I did get was I never lost a game of ping pong to any high school student or college student at the church my entire 6 years. And so they took my ping pong paddle and they painted it gold and went to like Things Remembered at the kiosk in the mall, if you remember that store. And they had made up this placard that said, ping pong champion 1999 to 05. And it's still in my office today.
Clark, that's the gift that keeps on giving.
That and the Jelly of the Month Club. That is right.
That's right.
Okay. So you mentioned a word in the bridge building to truth, and that word was influence, Stuart. Mm-hmm. And so I think about a couple of the statements that you made at the summit that really impacted me, and that I think really impacted, or I know, let me just put it that way, I know that they impacted the men in the room. And the statement, and I'm going to butcher these probably a little bit, but you'll know what I'm talking about, was, do you want to be right, mm-hmm. or do you want to have influence? Mm-hmm. So let us in a little bit as to what that really means, especially for the guys that are listening, and in regards to this next generation, or mm-hmm. even in our faith conversations, or, whatever the conversation is. Do you want to be right, or do you want to have influence? What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, I have to be right to have influence, but I can't have influence if I have to be right. If I am going to take a stand on some moral imperative at the expense of a relationship with someone, then I won't have a relationship with that someone, and consequently, I can't have influence with that person. So the issue of rightness is not really in play. The issue is, what do I have to do to maintain relationship with this person? Because the third part of that equation is this. If there is a right, the only way you're going to help that person get to it is to have influence with them. And I'm not here to argue what you think is right or wrong. My thing, Jesus said, Kelly and I are wrestling with this idea. It's an interesting thing for us as parents and church and faith leaders. Jesus said that you'll know they are my disciples by the love that they have for each other. Paul says that the fruit of the Spirit are these things: gentleness, kindness, self-control, all those things. Isn't it interesting that Jesus said you're going to know them by the love that they have for each other? Paul says that this shows that the Spirit of God is living inside them. And then we hold everybody to a completely different grid. And then we wonder why, we don't have influence with them. Well, of course you don't. Because you are more concerned about being right than you are having influence with that person. I may have told this story at the summit, but it bears repeating. 2 Februaries ago, I did the same illustration with the signs that I did at the summit.
And for those that weren't at the summit, he had teenagers that stood up on the stage and that were holding different secrets that they were keeping of different maybe levels of discomfort in our conversation with them or whatever.
Sure.
So
it all the way from cheating on a test to sexual abuse. There were 7 signs. I did that same illustration at a very large multi-site church in Odessa, Texas. After I'm done with the second service, the pastor asked us to go and stand in the lobby, Kelly and I, and just talk to people. I was really fearful for my life. The doors burst open, and the biggest oil man I have ever. People in Texas are big.
Yeah.
This dude is an oil man, and he's booking with his wife, making a beeline right toward Kelly and I. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm about to die. And the closer he gets, I realize that he's got tears in his eyes. His wife is crying, and he doesn't even speak to me. He just puts his big old crusty hand on my shoulder and squeezes it and keeps going out the door. And his wife literally runs into my wife's arms and just bawling. Long story short, their daughter had come out to them that year or the year before and told them that she thought she was gay. And I had talked about that in the service.
Yeah.
I talked about it at the summit, that you're either going to choose to be right or have influence. And the reason they were so emotional is that they had been made to feel guilty by their church because all they wanted to do was love their daughter. I think there's something fundamentally wrong about that, because I don't think that's how Jesus would love people.
Right.
So that's what I meant by that statement.
Yeah.
I'm not at all implying it's easy.
No.
But we do have to make
So good.
that choice and ask that question.
So good. So good. And then, and really what we're talking about is the second statement that you made that really I think impacted was, can you be the safe person, that safe place for teenagers to come to? Mm-hmm. And that's what those parents were trying to do.
Yes.
Like they had evidently created a safe environment, a place in their home that their student, their teenager could come to them and say, Mom and Dad, I need to talk with you about something.
Yeah.
And as men, we are so integral in creating that safe space. Do we create that space for openness, for honesty, for failure, for struggle, for challenge? And I know having two boys, I got a 19-year-old and a 15-year-old. He's about to turn 16, and the whole alpha male thing and all that kind of stuff. But as a dad, my job is to create openness and communication, a safe place and a place of love in my home.
That's it. So good. Yes. Yeah. The statement I made at the summit was, you don't measure how safe your home or your church is by how safe you want to be or how safe you want it to be. You measure how safe you are, how safe your church is, how safe your home is by the stories our kids have been brave enough to tell us. Mm-hmm. And when our children don't feel safe enough to tell us things, and let's understand this as well. We're talking about with Generation Z, they're the loneliest, most anxiety-ridden, post-Christian, sexually fluid, multiracial, self-directed generation in the history of our country. They have so many questions.
Yeah.
They have issues that many teeter on dangerous issues. If they can't come to you and they can't come to the church, where do they go?
Yeah.
And so we as parents, Kelly and I as parents, and then for our churches across the country, we've got to ask, how safe do we want to be? You can't say, well, this is how safe I want to be. How safe are you? Mm-hmm. Are they willing to come and tell you the gritty stuff? And then you have to be the graceful swan on top of the water while you're paddling furiously under the water.
Yeah, to receive and pray with, pray for, which is not easy either. Because your knee jerk is to, out of fear, often is, oh no, what are we going to do? And how do we help and how do we fix and how do we? Right. So that's so good, Stuart.
And every great parent takes parenting seriously, and they take it personally. And we have in our culture this idea. If our children make these choices or these mistakes, I'm a failure as a parent. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many parents I know who are unbelievable moms and dads, and their kid just made a bad choice. Mm-hmm. And that is not a reflection on you as a parent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. I remember having this was when my younger son was probably, I want to say maybe 12 years old or something like that. And he made this statement to me, Stuart. He said, Dad, you just want us to do everything right because it's a reflection upon you. Mm. And I was like,
yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Thank you, son, for
Thank you,
kicking
12,
me
12
where you kicked me.
Yeah. Exactly. But it was totally right. And to be aware of that and say, okay, well, how do we power through that and say that's not our motivation. We care for you. That's so good. Okay. Well, I'm super excited, brother. I want to give you a chance to do one final word to our listeners, but we're going to be continuing this conversation on parenting and the youth culture and all our role as parents on October 30th. So if you're listening, you're in the Sioux Falls area, I'm so excited to share the stage with Stuart Hall and comedian Dustin Nickerson again on October 30th from 7 to 10 p.m. For Parents Night, for RESGEN Parents Night. And we're going to be looking at kind of the stages of children's lives and the role that we play in each of those stages as adults. And I'm so excited for you to come back. Obviously, you had so much of us praying here, in Sioux Falls for you and your journey. And we just, and we know that God is going to continue to use you. And I'm just so excited to just minister alongside you again. And this has been super fun for me to be able to join you in this. And
let's keep talking. Dad, keep it rolling. Keep it rolling.
I love but I want to end our time with just basically the final word. So you've got, we're gearing this primarily towards men. I'm sure we've got families, teens, whatever, listening as well. But if 60 to 90 seconds, just a final word of encouragement, of challenge, or what do you have to the dudes that are listening right now as we end our time here together?
Oh gosh. Well, if you're a parent listening, my greatest encouragement to you, parenting has been, is, and will forever be an amateur sport. There is no such thing. We are the Olympic team, the Olympic cycle before the dream team, always. We will always be amateurs. There is no such thing as a professional parent. And I'm not joining you because I'm a professional parent. I am a journeyer like everybody else. I am passionately in love with my wife and 3 children, and we want our kids to be the greatest version of the person God created them to be, as does every parent. All of us as moms and dads want that. But the reason why it's hard is because it's hard. It's hard because it's hard. And so do not be discouraged because, it's difficult. It's supposed to be. If it wasn't, then, everybody would be the greatest parent ever, and we would just keep, producing unbelievable children into the stratosphere. But it's difficult because life is what it is. It's not what it's supposed to be. It's what it is. To the men out there, I have such a heart for us as men. There's so much toxic masculinity in our culture. I'm a big Joe Ehrman fan. If you've never read some of Joe's books, he talks about this idea that most men grow up in a culture where we measure our worth by our billfolds, bedrooms, and ball fields. That much of our cultural unrest as it relates to masculinity and its toxicity is because we have so misjudged our value. We've created an idol out of the billfold, how much money we're making, out of the bedroom. We think sexual conquest makes us a man. And many of us grew up in homes where the ball field was a big deal. Think about this, it's the only place where you could appropriately express emotion, but it wound up being expressed in an inappropriate, dysfunctional way. So to every man that's listening to this, what I would say is that we've got to bring ourselves back to the center of our existence. And the center of our existence is found in the person of Jesus. The cross and the resurrection says to you and I that you are enough. Amen. You don't have to lean into the bedroom. You don't have to lean into the ball field. First of all, if you're 30, 40, 50 years old and still leaning into the ball field, Uncle Rico, it's over. Okay.
Exactly.
It's time to hang up. Yeah. If you're playing church softball and getting in fights, you need to really rethink your life. That's for free. And say no to coaching shorts. But that's a whole nother thing.
Oh, it's so good. So good. Stuart, brother, I love you, man. It has been so good to just hang out with you like this. Thank you for investing in me during this time and investing in our viewers and listeners. And I cannot wait. Seriously, I cannot wait to see you in about 3 months right back here in Sioux Falls.
It's gonna be a blast.
And we're gonna hang out. We're gonna have some fun together. But thanks again.
I do want to apologize to everybody for how I yapped so much in this podcast. It's probably because I was in a coma for a month. So
You're just making up for lost time.
I'm making up for lost time.
Exactly.
And if I've said anything to offend you, send all comments and emails.
Can be sent to me.
No.
Can be sent to Tom.
You can email me at stuart@influencer.co.
Oh gosh, I love it. Stuart, this has been a joy, my friend. Thanks for the way that you live your life. Number one, for Jesus, and that you care for your wife and your kids, and you invest in not just teenagers, but especially teenagers, and that you've proven to do that year after year after year. Can't wait to see how God continues to use you. We'll see you soon, bro.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today, where my guest has been Stuart Hall. Be sure to follow him on all his social media channels, including Instagram and Twitter at I am Stuart Hall. And feel free to share this episode with others who may find our conversation helpful and life-giving. My name is Tom Henderson, and we will see you next time on ResGen's Giving Life podcast.